Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Cynthia Asienwa is a youth leader from Nguvu Change leader, and Sam Ogwal is an eager envoy here in the country. Kasmuel Makore is an activist. Brenda Ongalo is an advocate of the High Court. Nora Bosibori is youth policy analyst, and Kennedy Sankara is an activist, and he has been at the forefront of the demonstrations that we have been witnessing across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, lovely to have you here on the broadcast, and what a time to have this discussion. Nora, given the circumstances that we are in, was the finance bill just but a trigger of other underlying problems, including institutional failure in our country?
For sure, the finance bill was just a trigger, but looks like we've been sweeping a lot of the symptoms, under the table across from decades through, from when we got independence until now. So then what we've realized also is that we have a very poor political culture. I mean, we cannot only blame the political class, because at the end of the day, we also have to reflect and see, as Kenyans, how are we socialized? Who sets our agenda, really? Because sometimes, as much as we say that, for example, the majority of members of parliament who are definitely Kenya Kwanza, of course, they have to kind of support the president because they share the same ideologies. And remember, when people were actually campaigning, they did not campaign on ideology. They were campaigning to be part of the presidential team. The president was actually telling people that you need to give me this person because he's going to be my worker, that you have to vote me in and you have to vote this person in because he's part of my team. But then as voters, did we actually look at these people? Did we check their backgrounds to know who is coming to actually represent us? So the problem also aligns with how we are socialized politically, and that our biggest problem is that we are largely euphoric. Mm-hmm. We fall for populist people, populist politicians who offer simplistic solutions to complex problems. For example, during the debates, you could see that a lot of parliamentarians, before they were elected, were struggling to know what bottom-up actually was. Everyone was struggling, including the people who suggested it. So that meant that it was just a smokescreen. It was just the razzmatazz of throwing words everywhere to just make sure that you're voted in. But then there was no logic and there was no ideology. And part of the problem that we are facing is that we allow everyone to vote. I think we should not allow everybody to vote. Yeah. I think there should be specific parameters for voters. Because
for
at
example,
the end of the day,
if we are to set those parameters,
mental capacity.
Yeah, because, like people vote because somebody is an orphan, they voted for somebody because they were an orphan, or because they think somebody was a chicken seller and therefore they can come and help people grow because he was a chicken seller and now a billionaire. But then did they actually look at the background checks and see the parameters that were followed, or to know if this person actually, the processes that he incurred all through to be a billionaire. So at the end of the day, I think other than civic duties, there is a huge problem in our voting patterns that we have to look into.
But some may argue that if you lock them out from the competition, that would be unfair and unconstitutional.
It will be unfair and unconstitutional, but then democracy, I think, is failing us altogether. Democracy in Africa looks like it does not work. Because at the end of the day, we have seen that the will of the people has never been recognized. That people with money will actually come and subvert the will of the people. They will be given 500 shillings to vote for somebody who has never done anything. They do not actually understand the democratic institutions that we're talking about. Democracy is about institutions. And look at the institutions that we have, the judiciary, the executive, the legislature. Do Mama Mboga understand the role of an MP, for example? There's somebody who thinks that an MP is supposed to give bursaries only. And bursaries is actually a small quarter of the money that they're supposed to oversight. So, for example, if then we give money, for bursaries to the MPs, then they actually do not now take their role of oversight seriously. That is why they have been struggling to make sure that they stay with the bursaries. But then at the end of the day, it is a problem of illiteracy, it's a problem of poverty. And these are tools that have been used over time to make sure that our rights are stifled.
And given when we talk about democracy, because the beauty is that it gives, through universal suffrage, everyone the right to take part in an electoral process and elect leaders of their choice. The downside is that it gave Americans Donald Trump in 2016. And you talked about institutions. And we seem to be having also a similar problem here, is that in the case of the United States, because of his hawkish policies regarding foreign policy, regarding domestic affairs, causing up to dictators across the world, breaking traditional American standings across the world, scrap heaping or dust binning international binding agreements, walking off some of the agreements that the Americans had midwifed. But it's the institutions that stood up for the American people, including the elections in the state of Georgia, for example, when he wanted the outcome changed, trying to convince one of the officials there. In our case, though, we also created institutions that ought to be independent. If you look at the constitutional provisions, they clearly even give them, some of these institutions and the holders, the security of tenure to serve until the end of their terms. But it seems we are being failed as the Kenyan people by holders of these institutions. So how can this be made better, given the circumstances that we are in, and the lacking capacity from these holders of institutions that ought to have gave Kenyans the services that they so require and they so desire, but isn't happening?
It's really a problem of integrity. Like, as Kenyans as a whole, like I said before, is how we are socialized. There's really a problem of integrity, there's a problem of accountability, and it cuts across all sectors, everywhere. Like there was a joke some time back about a baby who had been sent home for some money to purchase something, and the kid added some money to whatever he had been sent and told the mom added some money, told the dad, and it kept going. So the problem actually is that we lack integrity as a people, and that we should start from the basics. That if we can teach our children that it is good to be accountable, it's good to be who you are supposed to be in terms of public service, we should be able to look at how people come, on TV and lie. People we have given a mandate to serve this country, brazen fabrications, and which have actually eroded public trust. And then sometimes this Mtuwetu syndrome has actually also brought a very big problem to our country, because at the end of the day, when we start calling these people out, they go back to their tribal cocoons, so that now it's the people who come to tell us, pesa ni ya mama yako. I'm sure you've had such kind of statements. So at the end of the day, all of us as Kenyans, we have to come together and make sure that we have to have values. And some of the national values we need to have is accountability, integrity, and, inclusivity.
Thank you. Sankara, coming to you, we have always been treated to this drama of Mtuwetu syndrome, as mentioned by Bosibori, and the fact that if anyone faces the accountability process, he often retreats back to his political base, says, this is politics, I'm being targeted because of my ethnic belonging. But can this movement of the Gen Zs, which has led to concessions from the government, end this culture of Mtuwetu syndrome and the often trump card, which is the political flimsy reasons that are often thrown into the debate? Could this be the end point of this, and rather focus on issue-based debates and governance issues that the young generation has kick-started? Are they the injection point of that fresh blood into our political system?
Actually, at the independence, Kenya was grappling three challenges: ignorance, poverty, and illiteracy.
We still are.
At the moment, it is unfortunate, 60 years after independence, we are still grappling with the same challenges at unexhibited ranges. You steal as an individual, then you seek defense as a community. I think at this point in time, the movement of Gen Zs is a confirmation that going forward, individual responsibility is not a matter of question. It is a responsibility that it is a law, by the way, in the public domain that you have to take responsibility of your individual activities. How do you loot public coffers empty and then you retreat back to your community in the name of defense? Mm-hmm. And that brings us to how people ascend to power. Take, for example, William Ruto, the current president. He is a man who got to power through populist politics. Little did he know that he was digging a hole for himself. This is a man who opened people's eyes on what we actually ought to have been having. But unfortunately, when he got to power, I think power got into his head and he forgot the people, the hustlers, and gave them another definition. So whenever we are going to elect people based on ethnic extractions as opposed to suitability and merit, then we are still going to miss it as a nation. And that's why we are coming in with the aspect of leaderless, tribeless, religiousness, because we've seen our problem with religion. You saw the other day, the president was very fast to host a group of religious leaders at State House. These are men and women who never opposed the finance bill. Yeah. They were never in the streets, but they were the first persons to sit around the president. That draws me back to
a good number of religious leaders have said no to the finance bill.
But the majority of
just
the
to be fair, we have the likes of Archbishop Anthony Muheria on record for saying this is a punitive bill. Reconsider. The Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops in a statement said no, this is going to make life difficult for Kenyans. I mean, it's an unfair blanket statement, is it, when you say that
most of them who are at State House are people who never made their stance on the finance bill.
So you know them?
And when
you know them?
I could see their faces. Anthony Muheria was not part of them.
Okay.
So I would tell you that the dalliance between the president or the presidency and the religious leaders draws us back to the biblical stories of King Ahab and prophets of Baal. I think that is what we are having today. These are people who are telling the president what he wants to hear, as opposed to what he should be told. And then, so going forward, the movement has set the bare minimums on public engagement. You know, when it comes to public participation, these are a constitutional process that had been hijacked by the political class to suit their personal interest. I have an instance of an MP or an MCA calling for public participation, not because they want to incorporate the people's opinions into the concept in question, but they call it as a formality to rubber stamp the entire process. So we are really moving fast forward, knowing that the people's voice is the voice of God. So we really have to incorporate the people, and not by just listening to them, but acting upon their issues.
But how then does this change that trajectory? Because Kuria Kimani, the chairperson of that Committee on Finance and National Planning, said during the final day of the public participation exercise that this is not going to be a cosmetic exercise. We will put into consideration some of the submissions that you have made before us. Yet there are MPs who are on record saying, "Ata sijasoma hii bill," some saying, "Mpenda musipenda, this bill will pass." Do you think this sort of approach and the disrespectful manner in which the Kenyan people are often addressed by the political class would end?
You see, character is like pregnancy. You cannot hide it. So the arrogance in which the politicians have been addressing their bosses, whom they perceive to be their servants, has actually shifted. For the first time, if you are to discredit protest, you've seen MPs publicly reject salary increment. Were it not for the demonstrations, we would not be there as a nation today. So the shift, I mean, the change is actually visible and evident that the MPs or the leaders have known that the people are still the power owners. And going forward, it is not a matter of incorporating us for the sake of numbers, but you have to listen to us. We speak through issues one-on-one and not taking people for granted for the sake of just seeing them there as electors. Because in the history of this country, I think for the first time, Ayub, we are going to have accountable parliament, because one of the challenges we are facing today is an administration that has captured vital institutions of justice and services. The presidency has captured parliament, and by extension, the judiciary. And parliament is not only captured, but also castrated. And the DCI boss emeritus warned us of a potential risk of having a parliament infiltrated by wash-wash gang. So if you elect a presidency of ICC alumni, and then you go to parliament and elect individuals with questionable backgrounds, what do you expect as a country?
Well, some may also argue that also George Kinoti has no moral authority because he violated many court orders that he never adhered to. I mean, we are talking about an establishment that is deeply rooted. And when the shoe is not on their foot, they tend to castigate the other party.
Yesterday,
because if you look at the case of Miguna, how many court orders were violated that were not adhered to the extent that arrests because of contempt of order, they were to serve some jail term. So where do we draw the line here? As a young person now, where do we then draw the line in seeking this wholesale change, the overhaul of our political system, and get the right people for the right positions? Yes, the structures are there, but we are lacking the people. And it doesn't mean that the people aren't there. The pool of professionals who have the competence, who are qualified is there, but they are ignored because of political decisions that are made at the executive.
The political class must distinguish between satisfying political ambitions of individuals while also offering services to the people. The presidency, which is the appointing authority, must distinguish between satisfying its political acolytes, or let me call them sycophants or affiliates, at the expense of appointing people with on meritocracy for service delivery to the people.
Okay, yes, hold it there. Cynthia, coming to you. What we have under our dispensation is that all power belongs to the Kenyan people, all of us seated here, and the millions who are watching this broadcast. But it seems that Parliament, which was placed constitutional at a very critical juncture to be the guardrail to oversight, check on the excesses of the executive, because they also deal with money aspect, the budget process. They can decide what goes where. But it seems there's a failure on that part. And parliamentarians are more hell-bent in appeasing any occupant at any given time of State House than the Kenyan people who are the holders or who wield the sovereign power. When will they understand that their employers are the priority and not the heads or the head of the executive?
I'll start by saying that this is not a battle for supremacy, the way everyone is putting it. It's not about who is winning and who is losing on the battle. It's about what is the right thing to be done and when should it be done. Because, for instance, they voted yes the first time. Again, the second time they voted yes. And when the president is coming out to rant about young people who are on the streets and the way they are criminals and the way they're doing things in the streets which are not okay, when now he came again and said he's not signing the bill, he withdrew the bill, they clapped for him. At the back of my mind, me, together with the other young people, we were asking ourselves, so why are they clapping? Are they clapping because their boss has now appeased the eyes of the young people who are on the streets, or they are clapping because it's actually right? Is the bill right from the word go? If it is right, or if it is wrong, why did they vote it yes? And when the boss now comes and says, I've withdrawn it, they again celebrate him. So I think it's a reward system where people reward loyalty. For the people who've been loyal to the president, they get offices. When they get the offices, they now want to serve the interests of their boss. They're not so keen on serving the interests of the people that elected them. So number one, it comes with accountability and integrity, like most of us are mentioning here. It is not supremacy. It's not about how you're winning. Yeah. It's about what are you doing after being elected as a person first, and as a leader and as a person who is representing millions of people who elected you. African young people on the rise is organize, educate, liberate, and celebrate. Organize yourselves, educate them. So I am a teacher by profession. From the point of educating, I would want the people that I interact with to know that it is okay to say no. when you see something which is not working out well, can you just be bold enough to say no? From our systems, accountability has been an issue. We have inherited a system where we look like we are not allowed to call out people for who they are, because in the public participation place of the finance bill, people participated. I come from Guvu Collective, and we actually wrote position papers just expressing what we feel are going to be the impacts of this finance bill. I think if it was taken into consideration, and there are way too many other people who wrote position papers just expressing themselves and getting the government to know that this is going to be the impact of this finance bill. If we listened to that at that point and took into consideration the things that people were expressing, if at all public participation was needed at that point. So if it is needed, then take into consideration the things that people are telling you. And then at that point, then we begin to solve a problem of accountability. So I just want to mention that it's important to call them out. I do not support destruction of property, but it's important to call them out, that we elected you to do this and this for us. Yeah. We are not seeing you do that. We are not seeing you active. We are not seeing you contribute to matters that are affecting the nation. We need to see more of you. We need to see you writing out opinions, even if you remain alone as an MP and everyone else is going for yes. You as a person, what is ringing through your mind? Are you just there to satisfy your boss, or you're there to represent the interests of the people who elected you?
Okay. Kasmuel, given what we are discussing, unlike other protests that have led to regime changes, here the unique aspect about it is that we have set our election date in the Constitution. I mean, because of our past, and which largely was engulfed in, because of alarming uncertainties. Therefore, we gave ourselves a very beautiful document. But again, young people, we seated here can't run away from the problem, is it? Because we are a representation of the people we have in Parliament. So why not make the right choices at the ballot, get the people of integrity who the young Kenyans are sure of driving a good governance system?
The question you're asking is bigger than the way you've presented it, because I think there are social issues which we cannot solve from a point of governance. In terms of making the right choices, I mostly belong to the cultureless generation, which are not as fluent in their mother tongues or are so in tune with the culture. And I would go back to take us to a very dark point in our history, which was the 2007-8 post-poll violence, of which I was a victim. And that led me to the loss of a cultural identification, because we had to run around to Ravine, then to Nakuru, then to Kisumu, then to Magadi, so the bouncing around. I think in fixing this, which is a deeply entrenched problem, we cannot try to have a governmental solution to issues like tribalism. These are social issues which will come through education and a part of culture which we greatly ignore, which are the arts. Because there's a Swahili saying that says, "Msanii ni kioo cha jamii." In how we interact with each other, the stories we have of each other, the stories we have of ourselves, and the stories we have of our state are the things that are going to help us make the right choices at the ballot. While we know, yes, that we have set dates in terms of our election cycle, part of the things that we need to do, and it's a thing which I would love to laud greatly, the civic participation and civic endeavors of most Kenyans right now of education and re-education. It will involve us taking very radical steps in talking to our society and not talking at them. And that's why I would say I would greatly hate this to be just infantilized and termed a Gen Z problem, because when we go back home, we have parents to go back to. If they're still enshrined in tribalistic tendencies, we will not win the war against tribalism by fighting them. Because remember, also we are put in a very unique position where they intermarried greatly, and we can no longer claim that we are like full Luo, Kikuyu, Kalenjin, Taita, those kinds of, we cannot necessarily claim tribal allegiance. A lot of this will be changed through vigorous civic education. And just to take away a lot of these things, I wouldn't necessarily say that we need to put a cap on voters or voting criteria. I would suggest, because that we need to hold space for the people who are growing as well, I would suggest we do spend more on civic education than we do on voter registration, which is a futile exercise, and it gives us an April Fool's holiday for one day where we go and elect clowns, because you realize a lot of the MPs, even in their campaign strategy, spend upwards of 10 million. An individual who is not very well off financially, and I know there's an exception, is it the Senator for Embu? Yeah. I know there's an exception to the rule, but most of them, because we've been taught to think in a business mind, we want to recoup when we get in there, and we enable them by having that handout culture. And you'll be surprised, Ayub, the effect that a 200 shilling note has on the memory, even of the greatest thinkers of our society. It gets to the point where we cannot think that there's even one of us who is immune to propaganda or socialization, because there are several ideas which are passed to us, and through our unconscious bias, the bias of our subconscious that allows us not to be very objective in our thinking. We need to invest more, and the way we are going to win this as Gen Zs, because I know it is very possible for us to even get a presidency without affecting the voters which President Ruto or the Right Honorable Raila Odinga had. We could still have a president out of this movement without touching any of that voter base, which should tell you a lot, because we have awoken to the realization that we are the majority of the people in the country. And when the Constitution talks about the sovereignty of the people, I need you as a young person to remember that that document is talking about you. You're the 80%, and it will be very unfair for us to just hand it over to 20% of empire.
But given what you have made, then, if you are an example of those who even can't address themselves in their mother language, and then you also talked about the tribal tendencies, especially amongst the older folks here, our parents, and that generation before us. If the numbers are there, then why just not make the right decision at the ballot without offending anyone or calling someone or disrespecting even the institution of the parenting, but just make the right choice at the ballot, especially for the generation that you have said can't even speak their mother language? It's possible, is it?
It is very possible, but I do not want us to isolate ourselves, because this is very quickly dissipating into the new form of tribalism. Because remember, previously what this government campaigned on was hustler versus dynasty. And we're heading now into an ageist sort of politics, because there always will be some sort of divide. I am not of the opinion that the Gen Z should just form a government of its own, because we are part of a very firm and vibrant social fabric, and the family and its sanctity is still very much a part of us. It is very possible, as I've said before, for us to get good governance, and this we will do through massive civic education without disrespecting our parents. But it would be very nice if we collaborated, because there's a very unique thing I've noticed about these protests. Even the generation that came before us, the millennials, the Generation X and the boomers, we've gotten a lot of support. Of course, there's been people who've been trying to tell us about things and advice and whatnot. We could go into the institutional rot, but this has opened us up to a very interesting situation socially, where we are articulating issues, and that's why I'm saying the political class is very tone deaf, because there is a very clear political agenda being identified by this leaderlessness, the fearlessness, where it is talking about, let us reduce pilferage. Let us bring, for example, institutions like Kenya Power, try and ensure that the resources that we have, because we do not have an empty food basket, yet children are going hungry. We do not have a water problem in the country, but it is manufactured by the business and elite class. And the reason why sometimes the technocracy does not work is we got to a point in our educational system where everybody was aiming for the market. So when you have people only studying for the market, we do not have people studying truth education. We are studying to impress donors. We're studying for the appeal of the international gaze, which puts us into very unique problems, because then I do not have to be a professor because I need to study, because I enjoy studying. I'm being a professor because it is marketable. And you find there's a lot of people who are obsessed with control of a contribution. And that's why I'm saying it is very important for us to come together, because people say, if I cannot control this person, they're not fit for me. We are so obsessed with controlling people and how they work, how they talk, they behave, that even if they're smarter than me, I'm intimidated by them, while all I could do, because there are people who are well-versed in constitutional affairs than I am. And if, as young people, we find a government and we know that there are people who can give us the resource, we could just pull them in on contractual basis, for example. So the call is for unity. We are not at any point, when we are saying, we're even pushing all the hashtags, even as Ruto must go, for example, we're not pushing for anarchy. We're pushing for clear and concise governments, with equality before the law and justice and lack of pilferage. And we will achieve this through socialization and collaboration. And if you look at it, sometimes we have people privatizing public problems. And this is in a way enabling the government. What we have been doing is showing the government clearly, these are the points you're failing. So they're obsessing of the wrong things. They're obsessing asking, who is your leader? Instead of looking at, this is what we have been able to do without employment, without any funding, without any money. And we're saying that it is possible for us to run sane government without any sort of pilferage.
And Sam, what do you think will be the effect of the demonstrations that we have had here and the subsequent concessions made by the government? How do you think this is likely going to shape up other governments across the East African region, for example, regarding how young people have been watching events in Kenya with close attention?
Yeah, I think the young people within the region, they have really learned a lot from what has happened and what is happening in Kenya. To the governments, I think this is a wake-up call for them to address the needs for the young people, but also to reform the system which they are operating in. I can give an example. This is the highest time possible now that our governments within their respective member states should consider bringing young people on the table. I can give you an example in Kenya. What is the average age of the cabinet? You might find that it's above the youth age. And that is the reality. Now, how do we expect these people who are taking key decisions to understand the needs of the majorities? This can only be effectively communicated by the young people who are going through it on a daily basis. They have the solutions. But because they don't have those spaces where they can express themselves, at the end of the day, they see themselves as orphans. Now, when you have pressure, or when the young people have pressure and they're not seeing the solution to their pressure, automatically they end up turning themselves, they become hopeless, and the only option is that, how can I overcome those pressures? I can give you an example. Most of the regional governments don't have institutions that support young people. But also, what is unique about them is that the institutions are there, but they're not supporting young people. What is unique is that they have programs targeting young people, but you can't see young people. And young people don't have opportunity to, first of all, audit those programs to see whether they're benefiting out of it. So the question comes, what are the outputs of those interventions towards addressing the challenges affecting young people? And those are areas where reforms must come in. Government must build institutions that are, first of all, inclusive of young people, but also at the same time, give young people opportunity to audit those institutions. The young people of Kenya would have put their MPs, if they had youth representative in parliament, on tension to say that we don't want that bill. Not the president, because they know that the members of parliament representing them speak for them. But we have a unique situation within our region whereby the representatives of special interest groups are nominated by the states. And if you are nominated by the states or the government, who do you represent? You're representing the government, not the constituency down, because you don't report to them. The young people of this country, the young people within the region need to have audience with their executive, the top policy-making organ. And these are gaps everywhere. How often do young people interact with their executives, starting from the head of states? These are the majority that cast votes, put you in that office, but the moment you have entered, you don't have the opportunity to see that person until the next election. So these are some of the reforms that need to come in place. Countries that are doing that, they're doing perfectly well. I can give, for example, Rwanda. The president always has dialogue with the young people. And you'll see that the young people of Rwanda, the majority, are supporting the system and they're appreciating the intervention made by government towards the country. because they are the country. They are the majority. I can give an example. Burundi, irrespective of the economic situation, the young people there come because they have the highest level of interaction with the executive.
Okay.
The same applies to Uganda.
Yeah.
There are platforms put in place to ensure that the young people issues are heard and responded to by executive. And these are some of the things I would want the Kenyan government to try to learn and see. I was very impressed before the election of Kenya, when President when President Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president, called on the young people from all over the country to come and interact with them. But was it a one-time thing? These are things that must be continuous, and these are the things that can provide long-term solutions to the youth problems.
Thank you. Brenda, is the lack of feedback mechanism by the political class why we are here, and their sudden appreciation that, oh, we had an educated, tech-savvy, very well-reasoning generation that they suddenly think was never there? Is that lack of feedback mechanism that they ought to have established the reason as to why we are here?
I wouldn't say we have had a lack of feedback mechanism, because you walk into the government offices and there's always a suggestion box. I don't know what happens to the suggestions that are given. We have social media. People have been airing their opinion on different things that are happening, and nobody just listens. So I think we've had a listening problem on the side of the government. Yeah. But at the same time, we have taken our Chapter 6 for a joke, because you look at the composition of government, it makes you wonder if we put that chapter, we have an entire chapter on integrity in the Constitution, and then it's the least used chapter. Like, why are you having in office people with questionable character? Why do you have in office people with running active criminal cases? There are things that, if you look at the suggestions that were given, the demands that were given by the Gen Z movement, the 14 of them, then the president comes and says he wants to have dialogue or he wants to have a conversation. Majority of the 14 demands do not require a conversation. Most of them just require that we adhere to the rule of law. We cannot be talking about rule of law like it's something that is in fashion or something that is trending, like a trending topic, and then we let it pass. Because if now we are talking about good governance, let it not be for vibes. Let it not be, we're talking about it now just because it's what is trending. So it should be, going forward, can we make sure that we implement our constitution to the letter? Can we make sure that we hold our members of parliament accountable? The interference with the other arms of government does not really inspire confidence, because if you have a parliament that votes yes, because you want to think that they are representing their people, or they are convinced that whatever bill they are passing is good for the nation or good for even their standing as a member of parliament, then 2 days later, shift. When the president says, no, I'm not signing these, I have listened and I think it's bad, they're the same people who are clapping. So where is their independence? Who do they represent? As I said, even our members of parliament, some of them seem not to know why they are in parliament, what their role exactly is, because you cannot claim that you are in parliament and you have to represent your political party, which you seem not to understand. I've always asked, is it that for this government, it's only the president who seemed to understand what his plan was? Because we seem not to all understand where we're headed to as a country. For you to get a sense of direction, for you to get where we are headed, or rather where the government is headed, you only need to listen to the president. You listen to his cabinet secretaries, they seem not to have a plan. You listen to the majority in parliament, they seem not to understand what is happening. You see his advisors, they all seem not to understand what the government is founded on, or where they want to take the country. And that is where the problem comes in, because it cannot be that it's only this one person that understands what he wants to do with the country. He forgets that the presidency is not the person. It is an institution, and the government is not just him. He's not doing this for himself. He's doing it because Kenyans voted for him. Yeah, so the fact that we are able to interact and talk and we have all those mechanisms to getting to him, and that's why we have public participation. The fact that people have given opinions, we have had experts give their opinions on various laws, but they keep on moving like this was for the sake of it.
So it isn't a mere cosmetic exercise as one would think, but rather a process that ought to incorporate the views of Kenyans and their suggestions. But it seems that desire isn't there because in many of the circumstances, Parliament is dead against the views of the Kenyan people, but it's more in terms of close proximity with the executive in listening to the requests and some of the suggestions that, or the directions that they are pointed to by the executive. Then how can that culture end, given what we have witnessed during the anti-finance bill demonstrations?
I think going forward, the members of parliament now have a clear understanding or a reawakening that they are there as representatives of the people who voted for them. Political party notwithstanding, political party standing notwithstanding, the presidency notwithstanding, I think this is going to bring a turnaround. And one thing that makes me happy, if we continue with this call for accountability, call for like perfect reminders for our members of parliament that you're there representing my voice. Yeah. When Occupy Parliament happened, it was a demonstration that we realize that we can exercise this power directly also. When through our elected representative, it's not working, yeah, then we can go and do it directly. And seeing them do, I hope it's not PR, refusing the salary increments and all that. Seeing them now taking a bold stand and saying, no, this is not the time for this. We need to listen to these people. I hope it's something that is continuous, that reawakening, so that before you want to vie for political office, okay, you need to go and introspect and think, am I the best person to do this? Am I allowed, does my political standing or does my integrity level allow me to vie for this position? Am I going to represent these people actually, or am I vying because I am close to the president and if I get him a few votes, I'm able to be CS or whatever? So I think it is that reawakening on the populace that is going to change this country. So I think it's something that we should just continue doing. The calls for accountability are genuine, and this is the moment that this country needed. We may have thought that we needed the new constitution. That is just a vehicle. Let's now take a look at the brief sampling of the feedback on X. The hashtag is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Gabi Wakasiaka says our demands are not the genuine pronouncement of malcontent, but these are the sine qua non in legal terms of youth demonstration ecosystem devoid of any pathological dysfunction. This government is now afflicted by a peculiar form of political schizophrenia. Kabetes says, it's unfortunate that our peaceful protests were hijacked by thugs. I'm glad, though, that the young people have made these three arms to sneeze. I'm asking us never to tire from restoring sanity in governance. Coming to you, Nora, and 2 minutes each for all of you. Okay. It seems that this new pressure from, or as a result of the demonstrations, though has led to, in some aspects and degree, meeting the demands of the protesters, but also it ought not to have been the case, is it, given the structure of governance that we have, which has given us independent institutions that ought to operate as required but have largely failed because of self-incapacity?
I think this is an awakening, like we've said, and whatever happened is actually very remarkable and historical. So going forward, I think what we need to look at is the transformative aspect of the protests, because we've seen elsewhere that these peaceful protests actually bring meaningful change to nations. For example, remember Mahatma Gandhi when he went and put activists together and actually liberated India from the British when they were us not to produce salt which they actually own as a country. So as a country also, we have to reflect and know that this is the time for change. And for us to ask for change is to make sure that the people who are giving us the change, especially the executive, come to us with utmost good faith and with clean hands.
Okay, yes, Kasper.
As a young person, it is imperative for me to remind you that do not tire, do not fatigue. You have seen the much that we've been able to achieve in the past 2 weeks. You have seen the impact of your voice and the impact of your decisions. Remember that a lot of people are talking about this with some sort of finality, but the fight has just begun. I know it is difficult, it wears down on you, and there will be people and agents of division sent to us. This is not the end. I know it seems as if people are just wrapping it up neatly, but remember, we're still commemorating the people that we've lost. We're still visiting with the families of people that were hurt. We're still demanding for proper governance, and this is just but the beginning. Let nobody tell you that now this is over and we've achieved something, because we do not want to end up like the Ford movement of the 90s, which ended up being did not end up giving us good governance. We will continue to press for these things. So do not tire, as difficult as it might be. And we might get some things wrong, but remember, we still keep going. We will still keep going, agitating for our rights and for good governance. Remember, on Monday, we're still occupying the Ministry of Health. So I don't think this is at a point where the conversation is ending. This is just but a beginning and a continuation of the conversation. And power belongs to you. When the Constitution talks about sovereignty, it talks about you.
Thank you. Cynthia?
In the voice of Martin Luther King, I have a dream that this nation will one day rise up to its creed, that everyone will be able to live to their purpose, that we will not be governed by our imaginations, by the things that are true to ourselves. What we are asking Kenyans is just to be real. Be real in your life. Live a real life, real spirituality, real governance, real fight against graft, real things. When it's not working out, call it out. As a young person, make your voice your superpower. Use it anywhere you go. Do not be silent, because silence is injustice to yourself, injustice to your country, injustice to your fellow young people. Speak out when you see things are not working out. It starts with you as a young person. It doesn't end with you. It doesn't have to end with you, but it starts with you. So what you think you can plan out on as a young person towards this government, do it right now. Make those small steps right now, because one day they will count, and we will be in the history of revolutionaries who took a step, a bold step, not fearing anybody, but going out there to agitate for what is not right.
Thank you. Yes, Kennedy.
Judging demonstration by its most violent participants and not the police force by its most violent cops, those are languages or words of dictatorship. As the people of Kenya and young people, we are very concise that we are not going to allow the devil's egg to hatch in our country, the eggs of dictatorship. Institutionalization of youth engagement should not be a political event, but a continuous process, a process that ensures that there is continuous citizen engagement, where everyone's opinion is taken into consideration. Because this country, the moment we lose our fear, they lose their power. So going forward, as a young person, you must be ready. And we all acknowledge in this panel that freedom comes at a price. It is never free. For me to sit here and speak freely today, there are men and women who lost their vital body organs for us to have Section 2A of the Independent Constitution repealed so that multi-party democracy is reintroduced in this country. As we move fast forward, the sovereignty of the people and the supremacy of the Constitution, those are non-negotiable and unquestionable provisions. And therefore, as a people, we must draw a very thin line or a thick line between fear and respect. We must respect people in authority, but we must not fear people in authority, because we are the authority. Okay. So going forward, if the language of a dictator is mass movement, we are going to mobilize, we are going to organize, we are going to occupy. You cannot tell me, Ayub, that today, as I sit here as a young father, our whole ministry can lose tunes of billions in a typing era. Whereas we have hospitals that are understaffed, that have no vital medicine. You walk into a public health facility, you find a facility cannot have vital drugs, but you walk immediately outside that facility, you find a pharmacy similar to the size of a public toilet, having all vital drugs. Conflict of interest is something that we must take very carefully and seriously as a nation, because this country, without our efforts and collective responsibility as a responsible citizen, we are going to have our country auctioned to the highest bidder.
Thank you.
So going forward, this country belongs to the people of Kenya, and our power is the power of the people.
Thank you. Yes, Brenda.
Mine is very brief. Let the government and the president have a listening ear and just implement that which is required of him. We do not need another committee. We do not need another NADCO, another BPI, another report to be done. It is about implementation. All the people of Kenya need is good governance, and that is entrenched in the Constitution. Let him adhere to the rule of law. Let all these not be a PR. Let all this not be made to look like it's something we are doing to calm down the protests, and not move forward with it.
Thank you. Yes, Sam.
Yeah, I think I need to take this opportunity to call upon other governments, including the Kenyan government, to always have continuous dialogues with the young people in order for them to address some of the emerging issues that the youthful generations are facing. But also, there's need to strengthen the institutions that work with the young people. For instance, the National Youth Councils that are created by an act of parliament, there's need for them to fund effectively so that they're able to report to the young people, but also constitute the leadership whereby the young people can own it. The young people need to have a voice into the affairs of their state, and it's very fundamental for such spaces to be created. It's very fundamental for them to feel like they're part of the system that is driving their development agenda. So that's the most fundamental thing. And I really look forward to working with the fellow young people of Kenya. I look forward to working with the Kenyan government to ensure that effective strategies are put in place to ensure that this kind of unnecessary, but sometimes necessary protests are actually avoided. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time is all appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. What a time to have this discussion. And looking forward to the engagement of the president. He will be on the X space, and we all look forward to how that discussion will unfold. Cynthia Sienwa is a youth leader from Nguvu Change. Thank you for your time. Sam Ogwal is the Intergovernmental Authority on Development Youth Envoy. Kasmuel Makoure is an activist, has been at the forefront during the demonstration, says Monday will be Occupy Afya House. According to him, Brenda Ongalo is an advocate of the High Court. Nora Bosibori is a youth policy analyst, and Kennedy Sankara, an activist who also has been actively engaging in the demonstrations. Your time is all appreciated, and many thanks for gracing us. We look forward to further engagements and to have you here on the broadcast. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on Daybreak. The hashtag has been Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Thanks for watching, and have a good morning.